Good morning, Jim Dandy O'Kelly here again with another blast from the past on the history part 3 of the virus lie. Let's tune in. If you believe that a living virus is the cause of human disease, you have been intentionally deceived. You have been deliberately miseducated, and you have been callously lied to. This is the greatest medical fraud ever perpetrated, that a living virus was the cause of polio or any other human disease. I have been doing research for almost 40 years. The last 5 years, with the help of the internet and original books, I have gone right to the roots of the history of vaccines. My information comes firsthand from the very scientists who were the foundation of the current virus vaccine programs. No other anti-vaccination organization or person has gone as deep as I have. With this information, we won't rock the vaccination boat. We will sink it, hopefully with a few virologists in it. This is the history of vaccine making. It is a sick history. It is a history of ignorance, deception, and lies. It has a history of scientists that were more interested in profits than people. It is a history of scientists who caused and continue to cause millions of children to suffer disease, disability, and death. And while they made and continue to make millions of dollars. Let me be perfectly clear from the beginning. The word virus is short for filterable virus. The word virus means poison. A filterable virus is filtered poison. This poison is made in the laboratory by a virologist out of the product of disease like nasal discharge or organs ground up and made into a vaccine. This vaccine virus can cause disease, disability, or death only when injected into an animal or human. These virologists have learned how to artificially create disease in animals by injecting and feeding them poisonous material. This is not the cause of natural human disease. The cause of natural human disease will be explained on another audio. Now, having said that, let me say clearly, there is no such thing as a living or wild virus as a cause of human disease. The reason a living virus has not been seen is because it does not exist. The world has been intentionally deceived. You can believe bacteria causes disease. You can believe whatever you want. But I will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the so-called live virus as a cause of human disease is not true. Here is the real story of the lie that a virus is a living agent that caused polio or any other human disease. Vaccine virus poisons are injected into your children because the virologist said and still says that colds and other human diseases are caused by living viruses. This audio covers the experiments of 5 original scientists: Martinus Bejernik, Dmitry Ivanovsky, Karl Landsteiner, Simon Flexner, and Thomas Rivers. Thomas Rivers was the chief architect who intentionally deceived the entire world with the lie that a filterable virus was a living agent that caused disease in people. An absurd conclusion made by Martinus Bejernik back in 1898 is responsible for this lie that has been taught since the 1920s, starting with Thomas Rivers. The word virus in 1898 meant poison, and it still does. You will see that Martinus Bejernik coined the word filterable virus, thus describing an experiment he was doing. By now your belief has been challenged, and your mind may be rejecting this. I know, because I went through the same thought process. Nevertheless, it is true, as you will see. Here is the real story, what they didn't tell you in school. In 1898, Martinez Beijernect conducted an experiment with some tobacco leaves that were said to be diseased. Beijernect took the diseased leaves, ground them up into a sap. He poured the sap into a porcelain filter. The reason he did that is because he was looking for germs or bacteria that might be the cause of the tobacco leaf disease. The holes in the filter were so small that if there were any germs or bacteria, they would be trapped. It would prove to Beijernect that germs were the cause of the plant's condition. However, his experiment produced no germs or bacteria. He actually proved that germs and bacteria was not the cause of the tobacco leaf condition, and that should have been the end of it. I use the word condition because you will see it was not even a disease. Beijernect did a very strange thing. The sap that came through the holes, he injected into the veins of a healthy young plant. These plants sometimes developed the same condition. Kind of different variegated color leaves and mottling were the symptoms. The only difference being that he created the condition in his laboratory, and the original plants developed this so-called disease naturally, and no one knew why the plants developed this condition in the first place. So what Beijernect actually proved was that he could artificially cause disease in a plant by injecting the product of disease into the plant. This experiment with plants led to experiments of creating artificial disease with animals. What the virologists discovered was that they could create disease artificially in a laboratory. The truth is that artificial disease is created in the laboratory and human natural disease, caught, is the difference between night and day. Either way, natural human illness is not caused by injecting diseased tissue inside of you, unless, of course, it is done through vaccination. Beijernect never knew what caused the plant naturally to develop the disease in the first place. Now here comes the incredible part. Beijernect concluded, that's a nice scientific word for guessing, that the sap he injected had an invisible agent in it that was alive, multiplied, and attacked the plant. Now let me repeat that slowly. Beijernect concluded that the sap he injected had an invisible agent in it that was alive, multiplied, and attacked the plant. Beijernect named this invisible nothing a filterable virus in 1898, which meant a filtered poison. On page 35 of Beijernect's actual report, he says, and I quote, "If those parts are extracted, an infinite number of healthy plants may be inoculated and infected from the sap, from which I draw the conclusion that the contagium, although fluid, reproduces itself in the living plant." You heard it right, folks. I'm going to repeat it again, and you're going to look it up. He said, from which I draw the conclusion that this fluid reproduces itself in the living plant. Now, on page 38 of his report, Beijernect says, only these organs of the plant that are growing, here only does the virus reproduce itself. Once again, only these organs of the plant that are growing, here only does the virus reproduce itself. This deception has been going on for almost 100 years. The deception is like a puzzle. You put one piece together in order to get the whole picture. Now let's be very clear. There was nothing in that ground up sap that was alive. By injecting that virus, which meant poison, into the veins of a healthy plant, Beijernect just literally poisoned the plant. And that was the cause of the condition he called a disease. Here is the source, firsthand, from Beijernect's own hand. If you have a pencil, write this down, please. concerning a contagium, and they spell contagium contagium. Then the rest is in Latin, and it says vivum, vivum, flutum, fludum, as cause of the spot disease of tobacco leaves. Look this up, read it for yourself. Look for the two statements on page 35 and 35, or 38. I recommend reading the whole report. It's not that difficult. But read where he says the sap was alive and attacked the plant. Beijernet's experiment, as you will see, laid the groundwork for this deception by Thomas Rivers. Now, in 1974, there was a book written by David Locke, who was professor at the Illinois Institute of Technology. The book was called Viruses, the Smallest Enemy. Now, Locke quotes Beijernick as saying on page 20, and I quote him, "It seems to me that the reproduction or growth of a dissolved particle is not absolutely unthinkable, but it is very hard to accept, and the idea of a self-supporting molecule seems to me abstract, if not positively unnatural." So you see, even Beijernick had his doubts. So let's go back now and discover the real cause of the tobacco leaf so-called disease. Another microbiologist by the name of Dmitry Ivanovsky was conducting the same test, the same experiments, with the tobacco leaf condition, or disease as they called it, and getting the same results as Beijernick. The difference being that Ivanovsky had something most people have lost, and that precious commodity is common sense. He actually went to the tobacco farms and interviewed the farmers who grew the tobacco plants. The farmers told Ivanovsky that they grew the plants in small, confined areas of just a few square yards in the same space, year after year, for as long as 40 years. Ivanovsky realized that the farmers were just ignorant about soil depletion, so he advised them to space their crops further apart and to rotate the plants. Simple, isn't it? The plants suffered from no disease. They were not attacked. Nothing multiplied. The symptoms, the condition, was caused by soil depletion, mineral deficiency, from overuse. Now let's prove it. Modern science will now confirm that Ivanovsky was right and Beijernick was wrong. For the proof, we go to a book that was written in 2002. The name of this book is The Life of a Virus. It was written by Angela Krieger, an associate professor in the Department of History at Princeton University. On page 32, she says, a scientist by the name of A.F. Woods of the United States Department of Agriculture challenged the infectious etiology of tobacco leaf disease, contending that Beijernick's contagious fluid consisted of accumulated oxidase and peroxidase, which cause mottling of the leaves by enzymatically destroying chlorophyll. That's what they didn't tell you in the school books. Chlorophyll to a leaf is like blood to a human. If you inject poison into a plant, animal or man, it will create disease or malfunction of the system, or possibly even death. Professor Krieger then follows up and says, in 1905, F.W. Hunger accounted for the mosaic disease through a toxic ferment produced through poor growth conditions and nutrition. And again, there you have it. Ivanovsky was right. The so-called natural disease of the plant was a result of mineral deficiency or soil depletion. And Beijernick's man-made disease that he caused was by toxins, which meant the word virus, which meant poison. Professor Krieger says on page 2, tobacco mosaic disease, or as they call it, TMV, became the model object for other viruses. This so-called virus became the model for the great Salk vaccine fiasco in the 1950s. On page 332, Professor Krieger says the story of the tobacco leaf disease was the beginning of the virus discovery. Then she asked herself a question. How could particles of disease separated in a centrifuge machine be alive? That's a great question. I asked myself that question some years ago. How could particles of disease separated in a centrifuge machine be alive? Well, the answer is simple. Particles are not alive. Particles are part of something. In this case of virology, virus particles are a part of animal brain, testicles, or spinal cord, or mouse lungs, separated from dead animal organs by a centrifuge machine. So, if a virus is not a living agent that causes human disease, what is it? Here is the real definition of what the word virus means. I have a Universal Historical Dictionary of 1951. Virus, a poison, a poisonous substance produced in the body as a result of some disease. Let me repeat that. You're probably not familiar. A poisonous substance produced in the body as a result of some disease. An example of this would be the disease of smallpox. The infection or pus of smallpox, a pimple or a tumor being eliminated by the body, is poison. This poison was referred to by the medical profession in the 1800s as a virus. You can look up old medical reports to confirm this. This virus or poison was the result of the smallpox, pimple, or tumor. The poison was not the cause of itself. This may be the first time you have heard of this, so I will reference it again with Webster's Encyclopedic Dictionary of the English Language, 1955. It says virus, venom, a poison produced in the body by a disease. Again, think of a tumor. Something has caused the tumor. The tumor was not the cause of itself. Another example would be arthritis. Arthritis is just an inflammation of a joint. The inflammation had a cause. It did not cause itself. The cause might be nutritional deficiency, or the cause might be old age, but something caused the inflammation. So when they define a virus as a poison produced in the body by a disease, they're saying that the pus, the infection, is the virus and something caused it. What Rivers did was to reverse it and say the result of disease was its cause, and then lied by saying it was alive. Think about this. It has to do with the real cause of most diseases, which is called toxemia, a word coined by Dr. John Tilden, and this will be explained on another audio. Here is a scientific definition of the term filtered viruses as provided by Mrs. Krieger's Book of Life of a Virus. Infectious agents that passed through bacterial retaining filters. Now, the only way these filtered infectious agents can be infectious or cause infections is if they are injected into an animal or human, as they are only made in a laboratory by the virologist. Let me recap. The word virus means poison. Bezernek injected liquid sap from a plant that he suspected was made diseased by bacteria or germs into a healthy plant. The healthy plant developed sometimes the same condition. When he found no germs or bacteria, he then concluded that there was an invisible living agent that multiplied and attacked the plant while it was inside the plant. This he called a filterable virus, which meant filterable poison. Ivanovsky, a modern scientist, proved that the condition of the leaves were caused by mineral deficiency or soil depletion. The United States Department of Agriculture, Mr. A.F. Woods, proved the fluid of the so-called diseased plant contained oxidase and peroxidase, which caused the mottling of the leaves by destroying the chlorophyll. And F. W. Hunger in 1905 concluded the condition of the plant was poor growth conditions. So the natural disease or condition of the plant was caused by depleted soil from overuse, and Bazerneck's plant disease was caused by him when he injected the plant sap into the healthy plants. But in the meantime, these bizarre experiments turned into a sick fad among the virologists. In 1908, Karl Landsteiner ground up the spinal cords of children who allegedly died of paralytic polio and injected that poison, or virus, into the brains of monkeys. And in 1909, a scientist named Simon Flexner copied Landsteiner's experiment. He cut out the spinal cord of a child who died of infantile paralysis. He made it into a liquid just like Bazerneck did his plant sap. Then Flexner cut a hole in the head of a monkey and injected the liquid spinal cord into the brain of the monkey. Simon Flexner was the first director of the Rockefeller Institute. His specialty was the study of snake venom. Snake venom, you should now know, was a definition for the word virus or snake poison. So now we will focus on the man who initially promoted the lie that a virus was a living agent that caused human disease. His name, Thomas Rivers. He worked for Simon Flexner and eventually took Flexner's job as the director of the Rockefeller Institute. Thomas Rivers also joined the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis in 1938 and became the chief researcher of the virology department for Basil O'Connor, who was its president. Dr. Rivers coined the word virology in 1927. Rivers now miseducated the medical profession by saying that any product or infection of a disease contained a living virus that was the cause of human disease. His boss, Simon Flexner, is the man who is given credit for transmitting polio from man to monkey. What they didn't tell you was the method of his transmission, the grinding up of a human spinal cord and injecting it into the brain of a monkey. And no monkey or man ever got polio by having that done to them. So we have Bazerneck injecting ground up poison leaves into the veins of healthy plants, and Flexner grinding up human spinal cords and injecting them into the brains of monkeys. This is morbid physiology at its best. So how did this filtered virus poison of plants and animals get to be accepted as the cause of human disease? It is so simple, it is hard to believe. Dr. Rivers and others just said it. They just repeated it over and over and over again. They said to all their lectures, to all their newspapers, a filtered virus is a living agent that causes human disease. That was it. He just copied Martinez Bazerneck's conclusion that an invisible agent inside the product of disease, the plant sap, and the spinal cord was the cause of human disease. Right from the source. Rivers says it in his own words. Quote, "We are here today for the purpose of taking thought concerning the knowledge of the so-called filterable virus and the diseases caused by them." Let me repeat that. We are here today for the purpose of taking thought concerning the knowledge of the so-called filterable virus and the diseases caused by them. And remember, when everybody knew what filterable virus was, they just dropped the word filterable and everybody just said the word virus the way they do today. We now know the only diseases caused by filtered viruses were those diseases that Bazerneck and Flexner caused in the laboratory by injecting diseased pus or products of disease into their guinea pigs. Dr. Rivers then says, the agents that cause disease have been given a variety of names: filterable viruses, invisible microbes, and others. Dr. Rivers tells his audience that they will now use the name filterable viruses because that is the name mostly used. Dr. Rivers then says the term filterable viruses will be used to name transmissible agents as its causes of disease. This was the beginning of the greatest medical fraud and cover-up ever perpetrated. Now, I want you to look up Dr. Thomas Rivers' report. Here's the name of it: Filterable Viruses, a Critical Review, January 31, 1927. Now, Dr. Thomas Rivers was the head of the Rockefeller Institute and appointed the chief virologist for the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis at the same time. He was in charge of the virus research program. Rivers controlled everyone, everything, and all the money that was dispersed out to virologists who were working on the so-called polio virus. Nothing happened without Rivers' stamp of approval. Rivers' goal was to intentionally deceive the entire medical profession and the world as to the cause of human disease by taking man-made created disease and informing the media that man-made disease was the same cause as a human disease. And unfortunately, he accomplished his goal. This deception is what led to the Great Salk Vaccine Massacre of 200 children being paralyzed and killing 10 more in 1955. The lie that a living virus caused polio and that Salk's vaccine eliminated polio. The rest of this story will be quotes from a book by Thomas Rivers that he wrote in 1946 and quotes from original publications written by the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which was also sponsored by Rivers and Basil O'Connor. Then you will have the whole story. This information will arm you with the weapon of truth. To recap, Bazernek took the sap of a leaf and injected it into a healthy plant. He concluded the sap was living. Then Flexner took the liquid from a spinal cord and injected it into the brain of a monkey. He is now promoted as the first person to transmit polio from a person to a monkey. Both liquids were called filterable viruses. Thomas Rivers just gave the liquids life by intentionally miseducating the whole world that this filtered virus was alive and the cause of human disease. Please listen to this as many times as you need to in order to make these pieces of the puzzle fit. You will be armed. You will be forewarned. You will not be afraid to take on any pro-vaccinator anywhere, anytime. And don't miss the next CD audio, which tells the rest of the story about this origin, this lie that's been perpetrated for 100 years. Thank you for listening.